Okay, howdy folks. Something a little bit different today. P.S. Thank you for the 6,000 subscribers we now have. Trotting along very nicely. But something a little different today. As opposed to sharing insights and things I've learned, this one's going to be more anecdotal. Kind of the experiences that have led me to here. And at least doing my best to shed some insight on some very mysterious topics, especially for those curious about, high strangeness, different dimensions, all this sort of stuff. And again, look, this is all subjective experience. Believe it or don't. I mean, I know these things happen to me. I experience them. Whether I actually give them that much credence or not is actually a different story. Like, I take them with a grain of salt. I have these really weird, interesting experiences, synchronicities and samadhi states and all this sort of stuff. But I take them with a grain of salt. Like, it is what it is. I'm just sharing my own anecdotal experience with you. I'm not telling you to believe it or don't. Now, what led to all this? So, this would have been November 2024. So, prior to then, bear in mind, I was a decrepit junkie. I was miserable. I'd been having the worst year of all time, 2024. To put it into context, I'd had a few good friends pass away. I was fully hooked on methadone, heroin. My shoulder was fucked. I couldn't play golf, which I love doing. I didn't have a driver's license because I cooked it and lost it the year before for a few years. So I wasn't having a good time. And in the lead up to my enlightenment, and bear in mind, I was such a staunch material, reductionist, scientific view of the world. I thought consciousness was emergent from matter, that there was no idea of God or life after death or anything beyond what you can see in your immediate observations. So this is all very new space to me. Don't think I've come in with a preconceived idea. In fact, there is no notion more dangerous than a preconceived idea. But I'll continue. So around September, I had a shoulder surgery. 10 years overdue, mind you, but that's fine. We got there in the end. Which had just come after me getting off methadone for a month, and that was the worst experience of my life. And then a friend passing away, and then me having a relapse, and then having this surgery, and then all sorts of hell. But I eventually white-knuckled all my addiction issues. I just sucked it up and dealt with it. Ultimately, because you can only ever save yourself, right? That's why I don't believe in rehab. If you cede your sovereign ability to heal yourself to someone else, and especially when you choose to then abstain, running away from your demons as opposed to conquer them, I just see a pressure cooker situation there. It builds up, and once the dam breaks, it's game over. So back to square one. Irrespective of all that. So I managed to give up all these hardcore drugs that I was totally enslaved to, being a junkie is a full-time job. And then this one night, synchronistically, I went over to a friend's place and they had this book on the table, Secret Weapons for a Quiet War. And it's a 58-page manuscript, which, took me an hour to read. Anyone who hasn't, I highly suggest you do. And whether you believe that to be a true story or not, it's actually a manifesto as to how the world operates. It's like the cheat code behind the world. Bill Cooper cited it in his book, Beyond a Pale Horse, actually, for the conspiratorial-minded among us. I'm sure there's a few. But anyway, I read this book, and something just clicked. It totally helped me see through the political theatre, the theatre of war. Earth is an anagram of theatre, anyway. But I gleaned this insight, first proper idea that I'd had in so long, because my mind was distracted, preoccupied, right? And I sent a text message to my mum at 10 p.m. saying, I figured it out. And then that night, I proceeded to automatically write this whole huge business idea, which I will still be acting upon in some point in the future. And I was so excited about it that at 7 o'clock in the morning, I hadn't stopped writing. And I travelled over to my folks' house, which I rarely did, to share this idea with them. They thought I was off my head on crack or something, which is understandable. But no, I wasn't this time. Anyway, I had a long day with them. That night, I had an argument with my dad. I was a bit up here. And I went home, met a mate for a joint, And I was meant to be meeting another friend for an early run at 5 o'clock the next morning. So I go to bed, or attempt to go to bed. I got up from the couch and noticed my ankle was absolutely killing me. I went to go make a cup of tea. And I look down at it, it's completely swollen. I'm like, what the fuck? Anyway, I limp over, make myself a cup of tea, sit down, smoke a joint. And my ankle just starts throbbing, absolutely doing my head in. And I'm like, what the hell? And it is going pitch black like this. And I'm like, I've not sprained it. I've not kicked anything. Like, I don't know what this is, but this is like really weird. And I was just trying to fight it because I really wanted to go see my friend for a run in the morning. Not that I've ever run. Maybe this was the universe telling me something. In fact, it was. Anyway, but I was looking at my ankle and I'm just like, fuck no, it's really sore. Anyway, I smoke a joint and I try and go get some sleep. And it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And I'm like, okay, what's going on here? So I go out to smoke another joint after like 2 hours writhing in pain. And I walk out and I have this little drinks trolley and I had two of my favorite little trinkets, if you will. One is a Jeff Koons balloon dog, a chrome Jeff Koons balloon dog, who, if you don't know, it's a famous sculpture, like a little blow-up balloon dog in sculpture form. And the other one was this little black coyote. So one chrome, one black. And I'm walking towards my couch to go roll a joint. And I picked up 2 golf clubs to use as walking sticks because my ankle's that fucked. I flick with one of them a slide into a shoe, which knocks into another shoe and knocks the drinks trolley. Bear in mind, I've knocked this thing a million times. Nothing's ever happened. And these 2 sculptures fall over and slice in half. Like this perfect slice. It wasn't like a jagged smash, break. It was like a saw through it. And I was like, whoa, that's spooky. But then I was like, maybe I'm just whacked. I don't know. And I kind of brushed it and I smoked a joint and I went back to bed. And I'm lying in bed and akin to the stories of people meeting the shadow man in a sleep paralysis state. Hang on. Norbie. Alright. So these 2 sculptures slice in half. And I go to bed and I'm just going, whoa, what the hell is that? And similar to sleep paralysis, so you hear these stories of Slender Man or the Shadow Man or the Old Hag or whatever it is. I'm lying there and up in the top left corner of my room, bear in mind my room's basically pitch black, I just feel this energy. It's like a dark cloud. It felt very ominous. I wasn't paralyzed or anything. I was conscious and aware and able to move. But it just felt weird. But instead of like shudder and get all scared, due to the absurdity of what had just preceded this, I just started laughing at it. And it kind of, in my head, I accepted, all right, maybe there's something to this. Maybe the whole God thing, maybe spirits or whatever. Maybe there is a there. I wasn't just going, oh yes, oh no, thank you, Father, anything like that. I was just like, I just opened my mind to it. All right, maybe there's something a little bit different here that I wasn't picking up on. Anyway, I'm lying in bed and I still couldn't sleep. I laughed at this weird dark cloud thing and I feel like it served a purpose. Like it was just trying to wake me up, if you will. Anyway, I went out to go listen to a podcast because I couldn't sleep. After like maybe 45 minutes, I was feeling a bit heavy-eyed, so I was like, all right, I'm going to go back, jump into bed. I told my mate I wasn't making the run. Anyway, I jump into bed and I start breathing. And I was just trying to take deep breaths, focus on the sound of the podcast I was listening to. And after like maybe 2 minutes, I got in this real smooth rhythm of breathing. Like it was really rhythmic, very conscious. I was breathing right down into my lower dantian, so right down here. And all of a sudden, I was kind of getting sucked into my body. It felt like I could shift my awareness into my liver, into my gut, into my this, into my that. And it was all there. It felt really nice. And the breathing got so slow. I felt like I was just a big like bagpipe or a blowpipe. And it just felt like the whole body was just kind of getting in this nice deep rhythm. And then all of a sudden I had like this weird spiral of light appear in my third eye, in the pineal gland, and my body felt really weird, like my soul wanted to escape, and it was fucking scary as shit. I was like, am I dying? And I was like, and I kind of got a little bit spooked, and I opened my eyes, and even though it felt so nice, it felt so right, I opened my eyes, and I saw I was in my room, sun was coming up, I knew I was safe, so I was like, okay. And I got back into that state, didn't take long. and this spiral just kind of emerged, and it was like like a porthole, or I don't know, just like a big white hyperspace spiral. Now, this is where it gets difficult to actually translate or find words to describe it. Many a great poet and many a great writer, philosopher have tried to detail in common language the mystical experience, but there's a reason it's mystical, because it's pretty weird, but I'll do my best. And this is what I understand as the heavenly dimensions. Now, I had 2 of these experiences within the space of an hour, in what I'm about to tell you. So, and 2 of them I felt were slightly different dimensions, but it was the same physiological feeling and experience, right? So, first off, this is different, at least from what I understand, to what you hear a lot of the OBE experiential reports detail. Okay, so I know a lot of podcasts at the moment are speaking about the Monroe Institute and leaving their body and looking back at their body. I wasn't in a room where you could see your body. This is outside. So as I understand it, you have a material body, so the Holy Trinity. You have a material body, an astral or a subtle body, and then your light body. So this would be the access that the light body has into ethereal or celestial planes, whereas the astral, the subtle body, is still in this universe, but in the spiritual fabric of it, so to speak. And I haven't experienced that, so I can't speak to it, but I'm just sharing you what I experienced. So as I accepted, so the thought in my head was, you need to accept death. So was I okay to die then? I accepted that in a content state. And that is what allowed my spirit to leave the vessel, right? And I got shot up this wormhole thing, and then appeared this huge mountain. This is what I have since interpreted as the Axis Mundi. I don't know. It looks like a Himalayan mountain. So I suppose that's why Tibetan monks meditate all the way up there. I don't know. This is what it felt like. And I was shooting up, and the background was like super quintessential, like The Simpsons. Like bright blue sky, white fluffy clouds. Like a Magritte painting. It was like really stereotypical and bizarre. And then the further I traveled up, the faster it went and the more surreal it became. At the top of this pyramidal mountain, you see these eyes, and if you look up Google, if you Google cherubim, these images pop up. Argos, the Greek peacock god with 1,000 eyes, that's what it looks like. It was like this eye of providence, this all-seeing eye on top of this mountain with all these other eyes around it, and it was trippy. And then I had a very brief flashback. One was of what I perceived to be ancient Egypt, flew over the pyramids, and then another one was underneath the Sistine Chapel as it was being painted. It was very brief and weird. But then we go out into hyperspace. Now, this all sounds so retarded, but what I experienced that to be was the primordial womb of creation. So when we die, when we go to our tomb, we re-enter the womb. It is a sea of liquid light in which all potentiality exists. It is a instant manifest of thought form, but in a far more flowing, psychedelic kind of experience. I experienced a heightened sense of synesthesia. So all sound is color, all touch, all senses are the one kind of fluid input. It was really bizarre. But in this ethereal space, I got greeted by what I came to understand, the Divine Feminine, or the Virgin Mary, Isis, Aphrodite, Venus, Mother Earth, Gaia, whatever. And I mean, the first notebook that I wrote down, I just wrote, the woman in the white dress is fucking beautiful. And you can't discern a face per se, but it is this spiritual energy in a clearly feminine body, like a very attractive apparition or entity. And it absolutely just blew my mind away. It was the best thing ever. You're in an ecstatic state. So this is like literally a 15-minute orgasm, right? So in French philosophical thought, the little death means orgasm. Now you can only orgasm in a present state, like in a total present moment of awareness. You can't be distracted, right? And so the big death in philosophical thought is the gnosis, the enlightenment, or the ego death, because it's your cerebral spinal fluid like flooding your spine and entering your third ventricle, your God complex of your brain, and flooding you with endoctrins and DMT. So that the DMT is the psychedelic out of body aspect of it, and then the feel good is oxytocin and serotonin out of the pituitary gland, right? It is out of control, and I've done every drug and every combination you can do of those drugs. This is out there. Anyway, so I meet this divine feminine, and we exchange pleasantries, I suppose. The first thing she said is, you need to treat your body better. And then she took me up, and we kind of went past this, it was like, I don't know, it was like a conference room, a circular conference room, completely enclosed, but I could see through it with all these avatars. It was weird. But then she took me outside of space-time, what I understood it to be, and we looked back at it and saw it as the chakra, it was a rainbow donut, a torsional hyperboloid, a torus with this spiraling torsional hyperboloid in the center, this dynamic center, the center of creation. And, it's been 18 months to kind of decode and understand all this information from the download packet, but it was really trippy and it felt really, really good. Now, I had another similar experience, almost identical, literally just an hour after, but this one I was focused more on instant manifest, and so whatever I thought, I could conceive instantly. But again, it's not as rigid as what you see around here. It's a completely different space. It's like, there's more colors and it's impossible to describe, unfortunately, but I thought I'd just share that. The divine feminine, the heavenly planes, what that is, it's actually a thing. And the slight obfuscation or the difference between the astral planes and the traditional out-of-body experience and this one. The main differentiator I presume to be the ecstatic nature of it, like the actual physiological feeling. But yeah, you're not in this realm in which you can see your body. It's further out than that, Now, this one's a funny one. The Order of the Melchizedek. Bear in mind, I have no idea what Melchizedek is. In fact, after the experience, I learned that it is a biblical name, I think Old Testament, but if anyone has any idea of what the Order of the Melchizedek is, any more information on Melchizedek, please let me know. But anyway, this is a funny story. So, I was at my old apartment. This would have been maybe a year and a half ago. And I was browsing YouTube, and my intuition is very sharp. In order to be aware of synchronicities, which can be very subtle hints from the universe, you have to act on intuition. And on the recommended things on my YouTube, this completely odd one out called Order of Melchizedek with no views. It was just completely out of place. And I was just compelled to watch it. I opened the video and it's this black dude with a headdress, not too dissimilar to a turban, but more African style. And he had one of the long heads, the long skulls. And I was and he had, he was just set up in, I don't know where it was. It looks like somewhere in Africa. And he started speaking this alien language. It wasn't anything African sounding. It was completely foreign. And then he started speaking English, and it was directly to me. And I'm like, what the fuck? I was compelled to stay and watch it though. And then he started speaking to me, and then he would stop. And in those moments of pause, I would then be communicating to him telepathically. And it was really weird. Long story short, this went on for 2.5 hours. I actually had the video, so the YouTube video, in my history. It stayed there. And I showed my mum and another friend, Marley, this video. And there's literally this guy speaking to me for 15 minutes, and then 2 or 3 minutes of nothing, because I was speaking to them through my mind. And they were like, what the hell is this? But anyway, the whole point of this conversation was he was initiating me into this thing called the Order of the Melchizedek. And he described it as a universal, a cosmic Christhood. And he gave me these seven virtues, 7 principles in which I need to exist by, or 7, I can't even remember. It was so weird. I wrote them all down in one of my books somewhere. but these 7 principles in which to live by in order to attain that level of whatever it was. And again, I don't give this any credence. Maybe I do. I don't know, but it'd be pretty funny if I go around saying, yes, this is Wumu of the Order of the Melchizedek. It's pretty funny. I've got it all written down. I misspelt the name Melchizedek, but I've come to learn it's actually a name in the Bible. So yeah, if anyone has any insight on that, hit a boy up. I'd love to know more about it. Now, this one is trippy. Alright, so similar to that prior thing, I was chilling at home one night, and some hour of the early morning, all my electronics turned off. My TV turned off, my phone turned off, my computer and tablets, everything, nothing would turn on. I couldn't charge anything, I couldn't turn them on. And I just got compelled to get my book out to write. This is a download, a package of information. Anyway, the first thing I wrote was this totally bizarre language, or this alphabet. Writing of, Malcolm, I don't know. So if anyone recognizes that or knows what it is, let me know. It was totally bizarre, and I don't get it, but that was just a thing that happened. But outside of that, they also told me my previous reincarnations. Now, this is weird. So my name is Mitchell. My previous 4 incarnations, at least in this packet of information this psychosis, whatever it is, was Enoch, who transcends into Metatron. Michael, Archangel Saint Michael, that represents the sun. And Apostle Paul. Now, I haven't read any of the Bible. You have to bear in mind, I speak of all this biblical stuff, but this is only from what I receive. I haven't actually actively looked for any of this stuff. So I don't know anything about Apostle Paul, but I had an interesting insight last night on Judas in the Bible. You guys have seen that I'm thoroughly interested in the whole astrotheologian interpretation of the Bible. And I got this insight as to what Judas is, or what he represents, right? So bear in mind, northern hemispherical point of view, if Jesus is the Son, what would represent his death? What, according to the solar, instances throughout the year, what would represent his death? Well, it would be the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year. Now, the winter solstice occurs, that is the last day of Sagittarius, the 21st of December. Before the sun stagnates or rests for 3 days before it births the new year, right? Literally just what the sun does. At the winter solstice, it stops for 3 days and it rises again. Anyway, so if the sun is killed in Sagittarius, well then, what does Judas represent? Bear in mind, he's the traitor, the backstabber, the one who kills him, essentially. Well, that is Scorpio. The scorpion is the backstabber. I was like, whoa, that's super interesting. And then I just had this remembrance of this Paul thing, this Apostle Paul. And I find out he's the 13th apostle. And I was like, well, what's that represent? And that is the 13th star sign, the 13th zodiac of Fictius, or something rather. The serpent bearer, because the sun, or the constellation, is by serpents. So he's the holder of divine wisdom and the one who wrangles the serpents, which is synchronistic, because I've done many an episode on the plumed serpent, the feathered serpent, Quetzalcoatl, and all this sort of stuff. What it represents, it is the spine and the brain. It's esoteric anatomy. But what was super interesting, I was like, all right, well, what does Paul represent? It's his constellation. Well, when is that constellation? In between Scorpio and Sagittarius. And I am, so November 29th to December 19th, or something like that, 16th, and I'm December 7th. So again, it's archetypal, and I'm a Sagittarius and my house is in Taurus. So Wumu is the divine bovine who is part equine. Equine, Sagittarius, bovine being the Taurus. Now, I receive all this information before I understand the archetypes that influence. It's very interesting. Anyway, yeah, so that's pretty funny. So that's the little, so Enoch, Metatron, Michael, and Paul make up Mitchell, and then out of the angelic writing, I found my surname, Lance. And I was like, pareidolia, maybe, but I just find it funny. Anyway, okay, this is funny. So these are two funny mushroom trips that I've had recently. I'll tell you the first one. The first one's very funny. So this would have been 8 months ago, maybe toward the end of last year. I was cruising at home and I had these superb mushrooms, penis envy cubensis mushrooms. If anyone's tried them, they're pretty cruisy. And my lights in my apartment, at least the mains, the roof lights, the fuse blew or something. I don't know. They weren't working. I just had electricity to my television so I could play music and I had candlelight to see. Anyway, I had this big bag of mushrooms and I was like, fuck it, well, maybe I'll just go meet the spirits tonight, So my intention was to just eat a stupid amount and go out there or in there or wherever that place was. And I was like, all right, so I got like 2 big handfuls, I don't know, 10 grams or something, and made this badass tea with like lemon juice and stuff. And I drink this tea, getting all ready for a spiritual experience, and then I started feeling good, and I was like, oh, maybe I might want to get a chick over. and so I go on to Uber Eats, and I order some condoms, lube, and then to make it not as weird, I got a 6-pack of Krispy Kreme donuts. It was pretty funny. And then bear in mind, this apartment, you'd go up my elevator and it would open into my apartment. So it was pretty funny. Anyway, sure enough, 20 minutes later, and I am turned up to the max. And then the bell goes, and this poor bloke comes up to my floor, and I don't know who was more scared of who. I was like a creature in there, no lights, just absolutely tripping balls. And this guy's just gone into like, wait, what? Anyway, I get the bag. Don't touch those things. Don't touch the condoms or the lube. I just get the donuts. Eat the donuts and end up having like this 4-hour conversation with the mushrooms. It was a very funny conversation, but I'll share a highlight with you. And for those who know me, I'm not one often for potty humor. I used to like my ego. Likes to think it's very cultured and yes. But these mushrooms and I were having a chat, and he told me a joke. And I have to share it because it's so funny. And if anyone knows a better potty joke, leave it in the comments below because I'm yet to find one. So the mushrooms go to me, why do humans like the smell of their own farts? And I'm like, The mushroom's like, who knows? Like, it's so stupid, but it's pretty funny. Anyway, that's one funny story. And then the other one, the Invisible College, this was more recently. I was getting like full into meditating with the sun and like, grounding in the earth and reaching up to the heavens or the heavenly chi, the sun, and, doing all this sort of stuff. And one afternoon, because I like to have a good mushy trip every few months, it keeps you kind of settled. Oh, there it is. There's my boy. But I was just compelled to eat these mushrooms. Oh, Mother Earth was saying, oh yeah, give yourself 7 gram, make a tea, and, blah, blah, blah. So I make this tea, and I drink it that night, and they totally kicked my ass. And, I don't know, I was having this funny chat with the planets, and all the planets, all they do is just laugh. Like, we were in absolute belly rapture, like stitches. Just laughing and laughing. But then came, this lesson. And it was weird, because the TV turned on, and it had, this woman speaking, and, these guests, and they were all speaking to me and just laughing at me, thinking, they were saying oh, you think you know metaphysics, or you think you're so smart, you think this, that, totally humiliating me. And I was getting all scared. I was getting it got pretty dark. And I went out to my parents' room, and they were like, Mitch, you're scaring us. Anyway, I went back, and they're just laughing at me, saying, just accept it, you know nothing. And then finally, I was like, okay, I know nothing. And then they got really nice. And then they gave me the coolest fucking lecture on philosophy and metaphysics and all this sort of stuff. And initiated me into Nature's Mystery School, the Invisible College. Now, again, this all sounds completely off hat. And it is. I get that. The gnosis is a controlled psychoses. We're all in a dream. It gets a little bit spooky. But irrespective of whether you believe it or not, I just thought these experiences that I've experienced are pretty funny. Now, the last one I'll share with you, this is a doozy. For those of us who are aware of what synchronicity is, together in time. This is a form, if you can force synchronicities, if you can force perfect coincidences, that is essentially magic, active manifestation. Now, often synchronicities are very personal in the sense that, not that you don't want to share them, that's a secret. It's just that other people wouldn't get them. It's completely subjective, right? But this one, just to show you the absurdity, because often it might be a very little subtle, 11:11, 4:44 on the clock. But this one is so obtuse that I think it's worth sharing. Now, at my old place in Chippendale, I'd sit in the park all day and I'd just read and write and, I don't know, have a beer, smoke doobies. And there was this dude that used to do something similar. He was at uni at UTS. He would come and sit and smoke joints and read. And one day I ran out of weed and I walked over to him, Callum, what up, bro? And said, oh, hey, bro, do you mind if I have a toke of a doobie? And he's like, yeah. So we got chatting. And I was like, oh, legit, I'm getting a bit of weed soon. I'll come bring you back a nug. And I did, an hour later. Anyway, next time I saw him, I was sitting on the stairs and he came up to me and he's like, so, like, what do you actually do? I'm a master at nothing. But I told him I was working on this time machine, like trying to break torsion physics and doing all this funny stuff. And I'm speaking about how I understand time to work. It being the central center in the torsional hyperboloid within an electromagnetic toroidal holofractal universe. But anyway, I'm telling him, explaining this time machine that I've been working on, not physical, like just a conscious one. And as I'm telling him about the time machine, bear in mind we're sitting in the middle of the park. You can't drive into the park like this. What I'm about to show you is you're not meant to do that. But as I'm telling him about the time machine, what pulls up right in front of us? I'm talking 5 meters in front of us. The fucking time machine from Back to the Future, the DeLorean. Literally the movie spec time machine one. And we were just sitting there and I'm like, do you know what synchronicity is? And he was looking at me going, what the fuck are you? And I'm like, who's asking? Anyway, that'll do for today. It's pretty funny, like. Anyway, woo-woo. Woo-way.